My name is Rachel, and I am 34 years old. Tonight, I am standing in a grand ballroom at a charity gala, wearing a navy blue evening gown that I purchased with money I earned through my own hard work. My 5-year-old son Lucas stands behind me, his small fingers wrapped tightly around my hand. He looks adorable in his tiny gray suit, his curious eyes scanning the elegant room filled with chandeliers and well-dressed strangers. Just a few steps away, I notice my ex-husband, Derek. The moment his eyes land on the little boy holding my hand, his face turns completely pale. 5 years ago, I believed my entire world had crumbled into dust when Derek abandoned me for my own sister. But standing here tonight, watching the shock spread across his face, I finally understand that his betrayal was never my ending. It was my beginning. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from today. If stories about resilience and second chances resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe to join this community. Now let me take you back 5 years ago to a time when I still believed in fairy tale endings. At 29 years old, I thought I had built the perfect life. Derek and I had been married for 4 wonderful years, or at least that is what I believed them to be. We first crossed paths during our sophomore year at Northwestern University. I was pursuing my degree in interior design while Derek was deep into his business studies. He caught my attention during a campus event when he confidently walked up to me and introduced himself. He had this charm about him, a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room worth talking to. After graduation, our lives fell into place like puzzle pieces. Derek secured a lucrative position at a prominent financial firm in downtown Chicago. His ambition was something I admired deeply. He would talk about climbing the corporate ladder, about providing for our future family, about building an empire together. Meanwhile, I launched my freelance interior design career, taking on projects for upscale apartments and condominiums across the city. My business was growing steadily, and I felt proud of what I was creating. We lived in a stunning apartment in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Every Sunday morning became our sacred ritual. Derek would crack eggs into a sizzling pan while I operated the coffee maker. We would carry our plates to the breakfast nook by our large windows and watch joggers pass by and dogs being walked through the tree-lined streets. Those mornings felt like proof that we had made it, that all our hard work was paying off. We talked constantly about starting a family. Derek wanted at least 2 children, maybe 3. I imagined decorating a nursery, picking out tiny clothes, watching Derek become a father. We even discussed buying a house with a proper backyard once we had saved enough. Every plan we made together reinforced my belief that this man was my forever. My younger sister Megan was 25 at that time, exactly 4 years my junior. Growing up, Megan had always occupied a different space in our family than I did. While I was the quiet achiever, the responsible one who never caused trouble, Megan was the firecracker. She demanded attention simply by existing. Her laughter was louder, her personality more magnetic, her presence impossible to ignore. Our parents gravitated toward her in ways they never did with me. I was dependable, so they depended on me. Megan was unpredictable, so they worried over her, fussed about her, and ultimately loved her with an intensity that sometimes left me feeling invisible. When Megan called me one rainy Tuesday evening, sobbing into the phone, I immediately dropped everything. She told me through her tears that her boyfriend of 3 years had ended their relationship. She said she had nowhere to go, that her lease was up, and she could not afford her own place yet. My heart broke for her. I brought up the idea with Derek that same night. He hesitated noticeably. He mentioned that we valued our privacy, that adding another person to our space might disrupt our routines. But I pleaded with him. I told him that family mattered, that Megan was struggling, that it would only be for a few weeks until she got back on her feet. Eventually, he agreed, though his reluctance should have been my first warning. Megan moved in 3 days later with 2 suitcases and a grateful smile. The first week passed without incident. She was appreciative and helpful. She cooked dinner for us twice and even bought fresh flowers for the dining table as a thank you gesture. I felt good about my decision to help her. But during the second week, something shifted in the atmosphere of our home. Derek started arriving home from work later than usual. When I asked about it, he explained that a major project was demanding overtime. I accepted this explanation without question. Then I began noticing how frequently he checked his phone, how he would smile